Make sure you get all your paperwork straight with this guy, because it seems to me like this is the kind of guy who you got to watch your back with.
Not just the back, the sides, the front, the top, the bottom. Watch everything, watch every deal. Be very careful, because this guy is strictly there. He's strictly there to sell a show.
Absolutely.
I don't really think that he cares whether there are moon artifacts or not.
No.
Just as much as I don't think we really cared so much whether the alien autopsy was real or not. His interest is to sell a show. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. It depends on how you handle it. You know, I have no problem with commercial interests in TV. We respect the right of people to make a buck. Okay?
Sure.
It's how you do it, how you come across that I worry about.
Yeah. And the fact that Kiviat made good cash off that Roswell alien autopsy nonsense. He made real good money off of that. So it's kind of interesting how now he sort of will shoot down Santilli and everything. At the time it was going on, Kiviat had no problem basically saying whatever he had to say to get that thing on the air. He had no problem, and he wasn't doing it to disseminate some amount of truth to people. He was doing it for the almighty buck, Gene. And that's, I think, anybody who listens to the guy, anybody who hears the guy can clearly hear that in his voice and the way he speaks and what he says. Yeah, he's like Murdoch. He's a businessman. I mean, if Kiviat thinks he's a newsman, then he should look at himself very closely in the mirror, because he's not.
Yes, you know, we understand, in a sense, he was telling us some truths here. We understand that, okay, Tiger Woods sells now, sells copy. And the most important story in the world right now is Tiger Woods, not because it concerns global warming, it concerns the state of healthcare in America.
No, by the time this episode airs,
because it's basically tabloid journalism. People like that stuff.
Yeah, but to confuse tabloid journalism with actual news is to be not provincial, but stupid as a rock. There. It's not that's not provincialism. That's just sheer stupidity. So by him basically trying to equate tabloid journalism with news, he was showing, well, the level that he's at. Lizards live in the pond. There, I've made my feelings known to the Paracast audience.
Well, that's a change. That's a change. We've never had you do that before. Look, let's just set that aside. I think the episode itself speaks for who and what he is and what this is all about. At the same time, as you pointed out during your participation later in the show, there is some genuine nugget of actual research, photographic evidence showing something strange is on the moon. And that's something we can get to in the future. In the meantime, you brought us some fascinating guests today. Tell us about it.
Well, we have an interesting, this is a bit of a departure for the Paracast, in a sense. We have the return of our friend Bud Hopkins, a man who I've grown to like quite a bit, both on a professional and personal level. One of the times that Bud was on here, he talked to us about a fellow who presented one of the most terrifying abduction cases that he had ever covered in his many years of research work. And to make a very long story very short, that person who he was referring to, who will be known today by the name Doug. Doug is not comfortable revealing the rest of his identity. I know who he is. You have his full name. Bud had worked with him extensively. Bud knows exactly who he is. You know, we can vouch for the fact that this guy's a real guy. He decided to come on today and talk with us about the experiences that he had with his brother, their spouses. This was something that was not a one-time deal. Doug has had some incredibly intense experiences. And Bud expressed an interest in coming on the show to help us sort of walk Doug through a bunch of these descriptions and to be here to hopefully mitigate any extreme stress that Doug goes through in talking about this. I've spent quite a bit of time talking to Doug one-on-one via Skype. I've grown to like him quite a bit. I consider him a friend now. He's a profoundly decent man from what I have gathered speaking to him for more than a few hours. And something we don't often do on this show, and we should do more of, and I think in 2010 we will do more of, Gene, is to cut to the chase and bring people on who are experiencers. I think that, we can talk academics around these issues all we want. We can speak to personalities, but ultimately, this is a very subjective situation, and what's happening here is happening to people. And bringing those people on and speaking with them about what they went through might not help us gain any deeper understanding of what's going on, but if nothing else, I think Doug will feel better. I know that Doug and I have had these conversations where we've talked to each other about a number of topics in this sandbox and some other personal stuff where he and I both feel like we've come away from our conversations mutually feeling better about stuff. So this is a man I've grown to really like. Bud has graciously agreed to come on and join us in a conversation with Doug. Doug, who has experienced some very frightening things, and who has been very hesitant to come on the show and talk about them. But in basically having a number of discussions with him and in Bud speaking with him, he decided that the Paracast was the one place he felt he could come and talk about this in a safe way. And so that's what we're going to do today. It's a different kind of a Paracast episode, one that I hope our audience will appreciate.
Okay, an exclusive interview with Doug, joined by Bud Hopkins, coming up next on the Paracast.
I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
Hi, this is Michelle from Namecheap. We don't have millions of dollars to get race car drivers or models to endorse us, but we will do everything we can to make those who buy domains or web hosting from us as happy as possible. We offer a free SSL as well as free WhoisGuard for a year to protect your identity from spammers or troublemakers. We won't bug you with obnoxious upsells when you check out or in your inbox. But most importantly, our customer service team really cares about you. It's what we pride ourselves in the most because it's your endorsement that means the most to us. If you like what you hear, get deals on both our domains and our web hosting at radio.namecheap.com, radio.namecheap.com, and be sure to play our contest by following us on Twitter.
Thanks, Michelle. And by the way, listeners, please use the coupon code Radio Day. That's Radio Day, one word, for special discounts at Namecheap.
We want to hear from you. If you have a comment or question about the Paracast, send it to news@theparacast.com. That's news@theparacast.com. And don't forget to visit our forums where you can talk to fellow listeners and Gene and David. Just go to theparacast.com and click on the forum links. That's the forum links at theparacast.com.
You hear it on TV, you hear it on radio, cash for gold. Yes, it's an enticing phrase during these challenging days, but the real question is how much cash are you going to get for your gold and silver? Are you going to get the best value? Well, you can get the best price from a company whose owners have decades of experience in the business. Welcome to Goldbug. The folks at Goldbug warn you that many of those high-budget gold buyers are paying far less than you deserve for your gold and silver. Goldbug will give you top dollar each and every time. To learn more, call 1-866-596-6134. That number again, 1-866-596-6134 for Goldbug. Or visit us online at goldbug.com. That's Goldbug with 2 G's. Goldbug.com.
Hi, this is Don Ecker, and you are tuned into the Paracast with Gene Steinberg and David Biedny. Hey, let me tell you what, you're going to hear stuff here that you probably won't hear anywhere else. Hear that, George Snorri?
Today we're going to be talking with our old friend Bud Hopkins and a case that Bud had brought up on the show previously, Doug. So, Bud, why don't you start by setting the stage for us?
Okay, well, this situation began when I received a letter in late 99, actually, from a man who was describing with the usual kind of ambivalence, his memories of a particular experience when he was driving on a highway from Las Vegas. And it was describing very, very interesting details, but again, with that tone of, I may be wasting your time, or I may be crazy, or I don't know whether there's anything to this, and so forth. I mean, everyone tends to back away when they write these letters. That was one of the ironies that when we hear people introducing someone on a program, say so-and-so claims to be a UFO abductee, people don't really claim that. They're writing and saying, I don't know what happened, I don't understand this, maybe something like that happened, but this particular letter was a very eloquent one, and it was filled with details about a drive, and I think it's probably best right now to introduce Doug, and he can tell us a little bit more about why he wrote the letter and what he was writing it about.
Okay. Well, for years, decades, off and on, this thing would come up and bother me and other circumstances. And I'd write these letters, but never mail them or email them. And I finally just had enough. The anxiety, the fear, I just had to deal with this. So I actually sent it to Bud. What happened is the four of us, my brother, his wife, and my former wife, we saw a UFO on the drive from Las Vegas early morning on the way to Palm Springs. On holidays, we flew down to LA to start a huge craft. We slid off the road.
Doug, let's step back for a minute. What year are we talking about here?
We're talking about 1980.
Okay.
And it was a huge craft. I mean, our wives were in the back seats screaming, and it was like a horror movie. I mean, we all remember this. I mean, we talked about it afterwards. The wives were crying the rest of the evening. And, some of the memories, I think it's what Bud calls bookend memories. You remember the beginning of it. I remember jumping out of the car with my brother, hiding behind it, popping our heads up. The wives locked us out of the car. They're screaming and crying to get out of there. It was like a horror movie. And
all right, again, let's step back for a moment.
Sure.
Where were you? What time of day it was? Let's again assume nobody has ever heard the story before.
Sure. Well, I was kind of pissed off. My brother woke us up in the hotel at like 3:30 in the morning, after gambling all afternoon, and said, let's go. We can be in Palm Springs by lunchtime. We can have lunch and sightsee. So this is early morning. If I had to guess, after we had breakfast at Denny's, 3 or 4 hours later, it's got to be 9 o'clock in the morning.
So it was daylight.
Oh, broad daylight. Yeah, beautiful day, clear, bright, hot. One of the reasons he wanted to leave so early, even though we had this nice, expensive rental car, is we heard rumor, stuff that people are driving across the desert, the car would overheat, and you have all these problems. So if you leave early, it's cooler, and we can get there in time and still see Palm Springs that day. And
all right.
So it had to be maybe 9 o'clock in the morning, 8:30, somewhere around there. When my brother first screamed out and pointing out the window, what the hell is that, as we, were zipping across the desert.
And am I correct, Doug, that you're taking a kind of shortcut that's been recommended to you to get to Palm Springs?
My brother.
You're on a small road.
Yeah, my brother is very gregarious and talks to everybody, so he ended up talking to some trucker in Denny's that drew him out a map of why go, I guess I'm a Canadian, so I don't know all the highways there, but I guess you go back on the major freeways back towards LA, and then down is the big freeways. He had these cross-country roads that he said it'd save us an hour or so, cutting straight across the desert and joining this road and that road. So, we hadn't seen cars or anything for, like an hour. I mean, we're out in the middle of nowhere when this happened, and it was gigantic. I don't know whether this is at the end of it or at the beginning, but to give you the description of how big it is, and I really didn't tell many people about this because it's unbelievable, I grabbed my camera case from the car. I had to scream and bang on the window to get him to open the door. I had an old Canon manual 35 millimeter camera with some lenses that I had bought for a trip to Europe a few years before. You know, no expert, no nothing. Learned a few things on a one-day course before I went to Europe. And I had to change the lens from a 50 millimeter to a wide angle. I barely got the craft in. It was so close and so big, just hovering maybe 2 stories off the desert.
Now, let's step back for a moment again, Doug, and let's talk about how you get from you're driving down the road, your brother sees this and starts yelling, "What is that?" So at what distance from the car was the craft when he first saw it?
Since this last 7 or 8 months of finally dealing with all this myself personally, you know, it was kind of hard to estimate. I saw a write-up on the Paracast about it's hard for people to judge distance. I think it was by Schuler or something. So I actually left my condo and walked across the street and paced off how far it would be. I would guesstimate maybe 75 yards.
That's pretty close.
Oh, it was close. It was huge. You could see the shapes in the windows. You know, it was very bright. I mean, this is the desert, so obviously it's darker in there. All it was shadow type things of figures. My brother, I just recently started talking to him again. He tries to avoid it, but I can get him to talk about it off and on. He says, I left the car. I remember leaving the car and to walk towards it to get underneath it.
Well, but hold on. No, we got to rewind again because
Sure,
you're driving in the car and you see this, and so you stop the car?
That's the whole thing. Part of that is from the regression remembering this. We slid off the road sort of thing. I thought in my fragmented memories that my brother was driving and he slammed on the brakes and we slid off the road. It turned out in hypnosis I remember I was driving, but you know, we went off the road. I mean, it's in a panic. People are screaming. It's
all right.
Okay, so basically let's maybe focus on this too. Now, we're dealing here with a remembrance that comes not just from your surface memories, but from regression. At the time this happened, Doug, what did you actually remember then? How much of it did you actually remember?
all of that.
That's it.
Well, and, you know, popping their heads backing up, looking at it, screaming at each other. You know, the wives in the back seat with the doors locked, screaming to get out of there, looking at the ship, seeing those figures. I took about, I don't know, half a roll of film. My brother grabbed his camera, took the way he was shaking and jumping around, probably 2 or 3 pictures on his camera.
Was the ship on the ground at that point, Doug?
Hovering about 2 stories up.
Okay. It was directly above you.
Directly across from us. If you look across the street at a house,
okay. Right?
You know, and the house is 4 or 5 houses combined, that size, just hovering off the ground.
Okay. Well, it was
Totally
a disc-shaped craft?
Yeah.
You say you saw some sort of windows on this thing?
Yeah, there was windows because, you know, you're scared. I mean, you're petrified. You're looking and you see these figures in the windows. You know, I'm trying to take pictures of this and trying to calm down. I'm shaking. I'm using the car to try to keep my hands and arms from shaking. Sorry, I'm getting a little, when you remember all this, you get a little excited. Yeah, it's like a horror movie. You know, I left the car probably 10 minutes into this. Derry last week says, well, you were trying to get closer to take a closer picture using a little thistle bush or whatever it's called that was halfway between us. And I said, no, I was going to go underneath it. But he ran out and grabbed me by the belt screaming, you know, get back. He finally went out and grabbed me by the belt and tried to drag me back to the car. That's when, you know, it gets fragmented. Don't remember much after that other than the ending.
Hey neighbors, the old way to meet for business is over the phone or in person. The new, better way is to meet clients and colleagues online with GoToMeeting. GoToMeeting is like meeting in person, but less time-consuming and less expensive. Start your meeting with just a click. Everyone can see your computer desktop on their computer screen, so they can follow along as you move from page to page. You can use GoToMeeting to host a sales presentation, a product demo, or a training session. Even collaborate on documents by sharing your screens. Our listeners can try GoToMeeting free for 30 days. That's a month of unlimited online meetings free. For this special offer, you must visit www.gotomeeting.com/podcasts. That's gotomeeting.com/podcasts for a free trial.
You're in the Paracast with Gene Steinberg and David Biedny. You never know what's going to happen next.
We have Doug. He's a UFO experiencer, and we're basically revealing on the air for the first time very important details about this encounter with himself, his brother, etc. We have Bud Hopkins of the Intruders Foundation here to anchor the event. Let's continue, Doug.
Incidentally, I'd like to interject with one thing having to do with hypnosis. As Doug has said, he thought his brother was driving. That was the conscious memory. But under hypnosis, he realized that he was driving, and he checked with his brother later. I'm not correct about that, Doug. And your brother immediately said, no, you were driving. So the hypnosis recall was correct, and the conscious recall wasn't. Is that right?
Yeah, well, during the hypnosis, I remember slamming on the brakes. We're sliding off the road, and this electrical sensation, I mean, it was like being plugged into a 220. I mean, it was painful. As Bud mentioned in that Paracast, I think it was August 2007, for me, I felt like I was being electrocuted. I came out of the hypnosis. I didn't recover any memory other than that. And this pain, you know, I couldn't move, and Bud brought me out of it, and I'm running around his studio, sliding back into this pain and cringing over and just screaming in pain. It took a hell of a long time for me to stop sliding back into that regression. I didn't learn anything else other than that I was driving. Well, by the time I got home, I mean, I'm barely controlling my emotions, you know, on the train going out to Connecticut, you know, trying to hold back the tears. I crawled into a fetal position and started to deal with all these other stuff that happened to me my whole life. I mean, other close encounters like this that you just ignore with witnesses. And just really, I went into a deep, fearful, depressive state. It took me 3 weeks to finally call my brother, because I mentioned I was going to go for hypnosis on this, because, you know, we all remember so much consciously after this, and we talked about it. So just to test the hypnosis, the memory, I made up a story, you know, and I started with, I says, oh yeah, and then I, you know, in this hypnosis, I got a comment area. I mean, I recalled, I mean, we're lucky to be alive. The way you drove that car, you know, we could have flipped. And he says, oh, no, I wasn't driving, you were. That memory from the hypnosis is true. Somehow, at the end of it, I was put in the passenger seat, because when we came to more conscious memory, the UFO was gone. We got out of the car, and there it was up in the sky. Now, if you put your hand out and put your fingers across, it's probably, a little over an inch large out over on the other side of the desert, sort of like flashing in and out, and it kind of wobbles, you know, and we're watching this, and then would zip across the valley on the other side. We'd watch it. We watched this for 10 or 15 minutes doing a show, you know, still excited. What the hell, you know, was going on? And then it went right in the middle of the valley where there was one little cloud, and then boom, this aircraft zips through the cloud, and this UFO gone. It was gone. Well, we stood around for another 10 minutes looking in the sky. Nothing happened. Scared, excited. You're in a shock. You know, you're glass-eyed, disoriented, shocked, shaking. It's a weird feeling.
Doug, at that point, were your wives still in the car, or were they out of the car?
Oh, yeah, they wouldn't get out of the car.
They wouldn't get out of the car at that point.
No, they're watching out the window, but they wouldn't get out of the car. They're still screaming to leave. They're upset. They're aggravated. They're excited. So we get into the car and zip across the desert, speeding like crazy, all talking and chattering. What the hell happened? What the hell happened? You know, what that UFO? You know, and they all remember this gigantic UFO, and you know, the women are still crying. I'm now in the back seat, you know, trying to calm my wife down, and hours seem to go by, and we finally see way off in the distance, in the dark, you know, the light of a city way, you know, that you see way off in the distance, and we're just rushing towards this city, which has got to be Palm Springs. Finally, on the outskirts of Palm Springs, or, you know, whatever cities are down there, I don't know, suburbs, there was a service station that was closed, but there was a phone booth. And Derry went right over the curb. I mean, just squealing to a stop. And we go right in next to the phone booth, and we're talking excited. We got to call somebody. We jump out of the car, my brother and I. The women lock us out again. You know, there's love for you. And I mean, and the two adults, grown individuals, I mean, both, you know, fairly middle management in financial institutions, you know, not insane, but you're feeling insane, squeeze into this telephone booth together. And it's dark, and there's a partial phone book there. And I remember struggling with him, just squeezing him in and squeezing up next to him to get that damn telephone booth door closed. Never realizing consciously that the damn thing, accordance, it swings inwards, which was a bugger. I mean, I'm using my foot trying to close the door. The light finally gets on, zipping through with the phone book, right up to your chest, trying to find somebody to call. And I think it was an Air Force station that finally ran across. And I called, and some receptionist or operator came on the phone and says, "Yes, which department would you like?" And I put my hand over the phone. My brother's face is right up next to mine. We're squeezed in. I put my hand over the phone. I says, "We're here on holidays from Canada. They're going to think we're nuts. I mean, what are we going to do? I mean, you know, we're on holidays." And I hung up the phone. And we struggled, like, fall out of the damn telephone booth, ran back to the car, you know, begging our wives to open up the doors, jump back in, and we speed off. And the first hotel we came to, we all ran in like little children and got a great big suite together. We wanted to be together. I mean, you know, and I didn't want a room with my brother and his wife, but we got this huge suite so we could, you know, and we're checking in, and the women are, you know, slowly unpacking, and they're still really upset, and I'm unpacking my stuff, and, you know, you're just scared. You don't know why. You know, what the hell? You just shook up. And it hit me. Why did we have to close the telephone booth? It's pitch black before we got into the city. We should have been here for lunch. So I bleeped that out. And oh my God, the women are just crying. And, you know, I admit it, I'm crying. I mean, you're scared. And we couldn't calm them down. So Derry and I went out to the pool in front of her suite, and he ran across the street and got a case of beer. And we sat there and talked about it. You know, finally, about 3 or 4 hours later, we had to talk to somebody. We called my mom and dad long distance at the middle of the night and woke them up.
Hey, Mom, Dad, you never believe what happened.
Yeah. I mean, bizarre, but we had to. So the next morning, you know, we didn't sleep much. We're heading out to breakfast, and you're still, you know, you just don't feel well. You just feel, oh, you're dead tired, you're confused and everything else. And my brother says, "Hey," we're driving by a strip mall. He says, "There's one of those photo booth things, you know, in the middle of the parking lot." He says, "Yeah, we can drop off her film." I says, "Derry, they'll see it." He says, "Oh, no. Every mall now, when you walk into the mall, even in Canada, there's a big picture glass in the mall, you know, at the photo place, and it's a big machine. They just put them through machines. They show it off, you know, the pictures coming out of the machine. They won't even see them, you know." So he convinced me. I was dead tired. And so we dropped off her film. He dropped off his 1 roll. I dropped off my 5 from, you know, the vacation so far. And it'd be ready at 3 o'clock. So we went around and tried to sightsee and did some shopping, but we're tired. And, you know, we finally go back at 3, and they hand me my packages. And there's my brother's package first, and then hands him 4 for me. I jumped out of the passenger seat, ran around, and grabbed the 5 receipts for my film out of the guy in the window, and says, "You're missing one." And I'm mad, you know, and I'm quickly going through them, and all the pictures are there, the other ones, and there's a roll missing. And Derry's going through his. Yeah, man. Isn't that something? I mean, I hate conspiracy. I can't listen to it on the shows and stuff, but this is true.
Okay, so you gave him the right number of rolls, but when it came back,
I got 4 back. So we screamed at this guy, and he got on the phone and everything else. We ended up going back to the motel or hotel it was, and we had their number of whatever, where it was developed, some big warehouse somewhere, and we're screaming at them on the phone, and they promised that they'll find it and we'll have it the next morning. Well, we were only going to stay in Palm Springs for a day or 2, you know, and keep on going. You know, this is holidays, but we stayed. We go there first thing in the morning when they open, no film. I'm screaming at them. We go back. We're calling. We got the head office number finally. We're screaming at them, you know, going to sue them, ruin their holidays, the whole kit and caboodle. Well, they're going to be there that afternoon. This went on for 2 days. Never got that roll. My brother's film, and we're not any type of experts on photography or anything, but there was 4 totally whited out, clear film that did not match, because he checked with a friend of his back in Edmonton, weren't even from the same roll, taped onto the roll with holes punched through them.
What?
Yeah, he still has the film.
Really? So they basically chopped off the pictures that were potential.
4 pictures.
They just
clear as to be, crystal clear. All his other photos are, they're not expert. But they're all clearly good enough for a standard photographer.
Yeah.
For a vacation, and all the ones after. And there's 4 that are missing. And somebody in Edmonton, a photographer, told him, "Well, there's numbers somewhere on there, I guess, on these things. That's not even from the same film." And they were scotch taped to the roll of the negatives. When I got back, months later, I got a letter in the mail from their head office in the States apologizing for that, giving me free developing for the rest of my life. Whoop-de-doo.
Isn't that so exciting?
Yeah, and they don't have any offices here in Canada, so whoop-de-doo. And you forget about it. You go on, you get on with your life, and I can never I off and on would talk to my brother about it. His wife still won't talk about it. I tried to get her to talk about it last night, telling her I'm doing this show. You can just see the fear this last 7 months talking to my mother and finding out stuff from the past that, when I'm 2 years old that I didn't know, just adds to this craziness. But she asked her one time in the kitchen at Thanksgiving about 5 years ago, nobody around, and says, that stuff that happened to you guys in the desert, what really happened? And she says, it's all true, and don't ever bring it up again.
Well, now you just opened up another book of questions here, which is, all right, this may be something that started all this, but it sounds to me like we're going back to childhood. Things are going on. Do you have conscious memory of those things, or was that something also that had to be brought out during hypnosis?
No, I've never recovered anything from hypnosis other than that, what I call a wireless taser that hit us. That pain. No, the other conscious memories, I asked my brother a month ago, because he changes the subject, but he throws me little bits of it before he changes the subject. I asked him about the one we saw in Victoria. Up front, a UFO came in, 3 of us, his friend from work, just gigantic UFO that came in, and we lost time. We came to with the radio blaring in the background with the announcer screaming.
Okay, we need to do a setup again. You have to remember that while you're telling these things that you've gone over many times in your head, people in the audience are probably saying, "Huh? What?" Because it needs to be a setup for it. But let's rewind more than that for a moment. But I'd like to ask you something. When Doug came to you for hypnosis, you took him back into this experience, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right. So please recount to us what happened. I hope you don't mind, Doug. But, I just want to...
No, go ahead.
Okay. What we started with was, always setting the scene. So I dealt with originally the trip from waking up and leaving Las Vegas on this trip.
Right.
And we couldn't get very far on this road towards Palm Springs, so I went back and started all over again. Sometimes the second time around, more things pop up. And what happened was, all of a sudden, Doug just screamed and sat up on the couch, wide awake, his eyes open, absolutely in terror. And I spent probably at least the next half hour trying to calm him down, and he would calm down for I don't know, a minute or two, and then he would start back shaking, trembling in this fetal position. And I've done a lot of hypnosis with a lot of people, hundreds and hundreds of people, and I've never had as violent an abreaction, the term that's used, as Doug's. I felt incredibly sorry for him, and I spent the next, without asking him anything that happened, because at that point, the last thing I wanted to do was to take him back to the experience itself. I felt we can deal with that some other week. But in the meantime, I was trying to get him somewhat grounded, and I spent the next hour or two with him. I don't remember how long. We went off to have lunch. He had a daughter who was about the same age as my daughter, and I remember I was trying to get, because he was extremely fond and connected with his daughter, and I tried to get the conversation back to his daughter and her safety, and she was home, and he was going to see her soon, and so on, just to get anything I could do to get him away from what he'd been through. But this was the really other interesting thing. He had told me originally that he had been seeing a therapist partly because of what seemed to be post-traumatic stress. And yet exploring with the therapist all kinds of possibilities of trauma from his childhood, of the usual kind, some sort of sexual abuse or physical abuse or whatever, some accident, and they came up with nothing. At any rate, one of the things I told him that really amazing day when I was trying to calm him down is I said, I want you to go back and call your therapist and tell the therapist exactly what you recalled and what the reaction was and so forth. And then I didn't call him for a week or two because I didn't want to really upset him by his having to hear my voice again. So ultimately what I found out was he had canceled future meetings with this therapist. And maybe, Doug, you could explain why you made that decision.
I went back out there, and I got to admit up front right now, but I thought that all these experiences of my lifetime could be part of the reason I was having, these post-traumatic stress things. I read a lot of books trying to figure this out for decades, that, it was just a psychological thing, but you can't be. I mean, too many of these times are witnesses, broad daylight, and blah, blah, blah. So finally, I went back to him and dealt with this. It took me about 3 more sessions before I said, look, I'm going to tell you something. You're going to think I'm nuts, but that's fine. And I told him what happened. I told him that circumstance and another broad daylight one with 3 people in Victoria a few years before that ended up on the radio and in the newspapers where we lost time. And the guy believed me. And I says, oh, yeah, sure, that's normal. You're going to say that and calm the patient down, et cetera, et cetera. What can you do for me? Can you fix this? I was hoping for a mental, diagnosis, and I can get a pill. I can get fixed. The bloody guy believed me. He says, look, I've dealt with a lot of post-traumatic stress victims from the Vietnam era. That's what I specialize in. I believe you. And
that's another point that just came to me here. Were you ever in the military at all?
No.
Okay.
No.
So you have no background like that, whatever. Fate magazine provides true reports of the strange and unknown. Keep up with the latest on angels and miracles, psychic phenomena, ghosts, UFOs, life after death, and much, much more. To receive your free issue of Fate magazine, call now at 1-800-728-2730 or visit their website at www.fatemag.com. That's 1-800-728-2730 or www.fatemag.com. What are you waiting for? Your fate awaits.
You're in the Paracast with Gene Steinberg and David Biedney. You never know what's going to happen next.
We have Doug. He's a UFO experiencer. We have Bud Hopkins as the anchor and the co-host of this episode trying to bring things together. In any case, moving on here. So your psychiatrist is assuming sexual abuse or something coming as a child?
No, he couldn't figure out what was causing this. And, I was never really honest with him about this stuff that you couldn't believe. Come on, this stuff is just too hard to believe. And I never mentioned it until after after this hypnosis. It took me, like I said, 3 or 4 sessions after this hypnosis to actually bleep it out and tell him about, all these, that one and the one in Victoria. And I don't remember whether I mentioned any other experiences of missing time in my life. And he believed me and wouldn't give me anything for it, didn't give me any hope, but now we can deal with it, he says. We can now deal with this. And I went home, and a day later, I called up his receptionist and canceled all the appointments, because as far as I was concerned, he had to be nuts. I wasn't ready to accept this. I still thought, these groups, originally when I went into Bud, I thought it had to be a cult, but I was desperate. It took me years of even once in a while going in to see Bud, or his Christmas parties or the Intruders Foundation stuff. I just had a hard time believing all this. I mean, people would tell me stuff, and, it was just too hard to believe, regardless of whether it's happened to you or not. And I never did go see him again. I mean, it's been and I let it drop again, as I have many times over the years. You get busy in work and life and all the rest of it, and then it comes back again. I mean, I started having some health problems, and it was time to look into this last year. I figured I better talk to my mom and get, see what else has happened in the past, tell her what was happening as a child, and I was petrified as a child, and why, and what I saw, and all the rest of it.
And incidentally, did she recall your phone conversation from the motel?
Oh, yeah, no. I had been able to off and on talk to Mom about this over the years. Mm-hmm. My brother, for the first few years after that, I'd bring it up, and you could see the fear in his eyes, and he'd look at me and say, "Why bring that up? I mean, all it does is depress me and scare me." Well, can't you just drop it? He's one of those optimists that psychs himself up on Sunday, and that tomorrow's Monday, I get to go to work, that type of guy. So, and I'd feel for him, and I'd drop it, we had talked about it enough. He remembered them. He remembered the other circumstance, and it's this last year that, I can slowly talk to him about that and the one in Victoria that he was with me, and find out that he's never seen anything but those two, and obviously apologize to him and say, I guess it's bad luck being around me.
Incidentally, how much time do you think was lost on that trip to Palm Springs?
Well,
you can't account for.
At least 4 hours, maybe 5.
Wow, long time.
Mm-hmm. It's pitch black out night. It's pitch. It's dark.
And that's 4 people.
That's all. Yeah, 4 of us, all conscious. All remember this.
Well, now hold on. Wait a minute. Let's a timeline thing here. Just to get the timeline straight, you guys wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning to hit the road. You stop off to have breakfast. You're in the desert. So when you see the disc, is it still dark out?
Oh, no, it's 9 o'clock in the morning. It's bright, sunny, 8:30 or 9. It's bright and sunny. It's already hot in the desert.
So the first memory of seeing the thing, it's already light out. Now, so you're out of the car. You're seeing this thing. You and your brother are out of the car. Your wives are in the car. You see this thing. Then the next memory is you're back in the car, except now you're in the passenger seat. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Did you notice at that point what time it was?
No, but we watched it for the next 15 minutes or so, zipping around the sky, got back in the car, driving, like I said, we waited 10, 15 minutes for it to come back, jumped in the car, started driving, and it's starting to get dusk.
I get it.
It's not very long when it's black, and we're rushing, speeding like crazy towards that light in the black desert. And we squeeze in a telephone booth. It's pitch black.
So where's the whole day at that point?
What happened to the day? That's very upsetting. That just scares the living hell out of you.
Sounds like it's more than 4 hours, actually.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like Canadians, you go down into the warmth in spring. So this is late April. So it gets dark still early, but not at 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
No, it sounds like Buzz said. It sounds like if it was around 9 o'clock when you see this thing, and now you're back in the car and you're speeding and it's getting dark. This is more than 4 or 5 hours. That's what it sounds like to me. Let's get in the time machine and go further back, because you say that you have these what appear to be post-traumatic stress stress disorder issues that go back to when you were a child. So now let's go all the way back to when you were a child and talk about the anomalous stuff that surrounds your childhood. You and I have talked about this a little bit off air. What was this thing that your mother told you about when you were a kid?
Well, I was mentioning to my mom how, I was just petrified as a small child. My earliest memory is just being scared as hell. And I'm 5 years old, 4 and 5 years old, and I was always petrified of these gray little midgets that would come at night. I never told anybody about this, but now I'm 55 years old telling my mom. And she says, God, that's weird because you were so scared. Even I remember when you were an infant, 2 years old, I not only had to have the crib beside my bed, I had to hold your hand. I always wonder why you were so terrified. So she starts telling me stuff. I says, geez, when you were 2, you stopped walking for a while there. I mean, you were in pain. You'd cry because of this pain in your knee. And I don't remember that. I'm 2 years old. She says, yeah, this is like January 1957. So I took you to the doctor, and the doctor says, well, you've got a new baby in the house, my younger brother. He's probably doing it for sympathy. And she says, oh, no, I caught him. I was potty trained at that time. I caught him crawling, whimpering in the middle of the night to the bathroom. He wouldn't be crawling into the bathroom in the middle of the night for when everybody's sleeping unless he's really in pain. So she took me to the local hospital. This is Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. They took an x-ray. And she says, geez, and they found in your knee, there's nothing broken or no holes or anything else, but you have this black, dark spot in your knee, inside your knee, that they couldn't explain. So here's the weird part. She says, and I'm still wondering about this years later, now that we're talking about this. Mm-hmm. They insisted on keeping you. So you were checked into the hospital, and for the next 4 or 5 weeks, I was calling on a regular basis, when can I get my son out? And they wouldn't let me visit. Nobody was allowed to visit you. I mean, you're 2 years old. That's got to be frightening.
Well, now that's extreme. I mean, so you're in the hospital for 4 to 5 weeks, and the hospital is not letting your parents visit you.
Yes, and she says, I argued with the nuns and everything. This is just outside the Air Force Base. My dad was in the forces. And she says, I just thought it was, they had all these excuses that didn't make sense, that it would upset you and all this sort of stuff. But I finally, after 4 or 5 weeks, went in and took you. And here you got a cast on. And I said, what'd you do? I mean, did you have an operation? Oh, no, we got a cast just to isolate it so he can't move it. And we're observing him. And they wouldn't take the cast off.
They're observing him. Oh,
that's why they kept me. They're observing me.
Now, in Canada, are there no patient rights?
This is 1957.
Sure.
I wouldn't have a...
Who knows, right? Yeah, I mean...
And talking about this with my mom all these years later, I said, that doesn't make sense, Mom. She said, well, they were pretty convincing that it would upset you, and that was their rules and all that. But she says, now that I think about it, your brother Derry, when we moved 7 months later to Calgary, Dad got transferred. He had his eye surgery. He had cross eyes. Everybody was allowed to visit him. So I don't know. It doesn't make sense. But they refused to take this cast off. So you had this cast, this 2-year-old, for 5 months until Dad got transferred to the Air Force Base outside of Calgary. And that's the first thing I did, is when we got to Calgary, I took you into town and had the cast removed at the hospital.
This is extremely weird. Now, Doug, what did your father do for the Air Force?
He was just in the grounds, construction, that sort of thing. Nothing. Okay. Wasn't a pilot or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So.
All right. So, did you speak to him at any point after the what? How?
No.
All right. So
he died a few years ago.
Okay. So this was your mother's recollection that they were trying to just come see you because you're their 2-year-old son, and now they haven't seen you for 5 weeks. Which I mean, it's extreme.
And she says, and she's got a black and white photo of me sitting on my dad's knee with a cast on.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Well, it's this is extremely bizarre. I'm just wondering, because I didn't know anything about this at the time, that I was working with Doug. Doug, is there any kind of scar or mark where that was on the inside of your knee?
Not that I know of. I have a what they call a scoop mark on one knee, below the knee, a small little scoop mark that I thought from a memory from when I'm about 7 or 8 that I never really considered to be anything, because I don't have any recognition of seeing a UFO before or after. But with my 4 brothers running through the woods one time, I mean, I remember, the same sort of scared, confused, standing there screaming that I had a bloodsucker on my leg. And then coming to, looking down and there's no bloodsucker, but I've got a scoop mark.
Anything, Doug, in a way that your limbs function that might seem impaired at all? Have you had arthritic problems with your knees, anything like that?
No, other than, 25 years ago I screwed my knee in a skiing accident. But, that was a beautiful jump off a mountain. And
there was some compensation here. It was a beautiful jump anyway.
Yeah, I tore my ACL in half, but...
Now, maybe you could amplify this. When you brought him into hypnotic regression, did you make any effort to unearth some of these childhood memories, especially the ones when he was very young?
No. I started with obviously the case that had the most supporting evidence, the fact there were 3 other witnesses involved, and it was a daytime UFO sighting, and with a missing time experience that was equally experienced by 3 other people. So that was naturally the place to start, and that was the sole hypnotic regression I did with Doug, because
I wasn't going to do that again.
No, well, neither was I have to say, Doug. One of the things is, of course, that it's apart from the bonus of getting new information, the most important thing, of course, is the welfare of the person I'm working with. And I was doing everything from then on that I could do to somehow calm Doug in the days and weeks later by exchange of emails and phone conversations. And one time, just to talk over how things were going, I arranged to meet him at the Metropolitan Museum, because I thought a more neutral and kind of exciting environment would be better than having him face my studio and the couch and the place that he had such a traumatic reenactment of his experience. So I never actually looked into any of the rest of these experiences, and some of the things that I'm hearing now are completely new to me.
Well, I avoided all this as much as I could. I mean, I'd come into some of your Intruders Foundations or your Christmas parties, because another guy I knew that you knew from Stanford would bug me, and I'd finally go in, and people would be talking about all this stuff. I thought it was crazy. I mean, it was like going to a Star Trek convention. They're talking about stuff that I knew nothing about and didn't want to. It scared me. Linda, who you wrote the book about, I'd listened to her story about her abduction at the Brooklyn Bridge and stuff. I just had a hard time believing all this stuff.
And I remember you actually fleeing from a party once.
Well, yeah, I avoided everything for about a year, and this guy talked me into going into your Christmas party, and I avoided the floor where you have your studio as much as I could, and finally went in there and, had flashbacks about that session, and I just got the hell out of your studio, your apartment.
And we sent somebody after you to try to get you and calm you down.
Yeah, well, we went to the bar and, drank, and he was a lot of help with dealing with this. It's hard to incorporate this stuff into your life. It's just too surreal.
Of course.
Regardless of, how many things have happened to you. I mean, I never talked to you about these things. I mean, he would tell me, call Bud. But then he'd mention that he saw some lights in the middle of the night and he's going to call you. And I'm not a stupid man. I realize that there's people all over the world bugging in. I don't like to impose on people, and realize that you have enough to deal with. You don't need another nut calling you with these things. I tried to deal that on my own. I read books. I would read 5 or 6 books a week. I mean, I was reading physics and quantum mechanics, religious books, every book I can get my hands on to do with psychology, trying to incorporate all these circumstances in my life to come up with a solution. But, when you're 5 years old and you wake up and you see an alien, these weird arms and hands going in to get you, and every 10 years or 15 years in your life, you have a close encounter, like the one in the desert. Mm-hmm. Like I mentioned, the one in Victoria, 3 of us, comes right up to us and took the whole bloody sky, and then we missed time. I mean, it's too surreal. How is this possible?
Well, now let's get into the specifics, because you've mentioned that episode with 3 people. Let's get into the specifics of the when, the what of that one.
This is going to be about, yeah.
We have a couple of minutes to wrap up this particular part of the show, but maybe we can get the initial overall look at it, and then we'll go into details during the next hour. Doug?
I flew into Victoria in 1974 for a long weekend to see the same brother, and
who right now doesn't like you very much.
Oh, I apologized about 2 months ago that it's just unlucky twice to be with me when this happens. But we went to pick up his friend, who may, if he's listening, Greg Campbell. We don't know where you are anymore. Give us a call, or me a call, and I'd like to talk to you about this. But we watched a UFO off his patio over the water. This string of lights that had to be a couple inches long comes quietly over the ocean as the sun was going down, and got bigger and bigger and bigger until it took up the whole sky in front of us. It's just gray. You could see the UFO shape of it completely in this huge string of lights. It took almost your whole peripheral vision. And then it's quietly swooped over so you could see the undercarriage of it. So you got a big circle of lights taking the whole sky and a little circle of lights underneath. And that's all I remember. That's all Gary remembers until I asked.
Well, now, hold on. Wait. Rewind. Where are you when this is going on?
Victoria, British Columbia.
No, but you're in a building, you're outside,
We drove in my brother's company car to pick up his friend, who lived just off the water in Victoria, so he had an unobstructed view of the ocean.
House or building? Apartment or house? Condo. Okay. So you're in the condo, you're on the patio, you're in front?
We're on the patio, having a beer, just the first couple sips, bugging him to hurry up, and he'd be popping back and forth out to the patio with the patio doors open, stereo blaring, showing off, what about this tie, and that sort of stuff, and Derry would, say, yeah, that's fine, let's go. We had a dinner reservation before we would go off for the night to, the discos.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is that in more detail as we progress towards the second hour. We have Doug, a UFO experiencer with a lifetime of very frightening encounters, as we're learning this evening, and also our co-host for this episode, Bud Hopkins, more on the other side of the Paracast.
To automatically assume that everything is the work of an extraterrestrial intelligence, I think, would be a mistake. To automatically assume that things that you can't understand are supernatural occurrences, I think that's a mistake. I think that because physics as a science is so imperfect, that we may discover eventually that some of the more baffling things that we experience as phenomenon will later be described in very precise terms using tools which we don't have now, which will be developed later to give more rational explanations for stuff that is too scary.
Welcome back to the Paracast with Gene Steinberg and David Biedny.
We return with Doug, a UFO experiencer, and with Bud Hopkins, who is of the Intruders Foundation and author of books on UFO abductions. We're focusing on the encounters by Doug, members of his family and friends, and now one particular instance where you see a UFO, you're on the patio of this condo, right?
Yes.
Okay, was this on a ground floor, elevated, Doug? What are we talking about here?
I think we're up on the first floor. Sort of on a hill, so, some would be lower. We're the multi-level, so, there'd be, I don't know whether there's an apartment below them, but it might be half the foundation or something.
All right.
I never crawled out there to see. I mean,
about what time? So it's like it's dusk. Is it still light out, or what time?
When we first were on the patio, we're watching the sun go down.
Okay. Gotcha.
It's beautiful, sunset over the ocean, and it's just starting to get dusk. And it's just getting that gray color, where the sun has gone down. There's just maybe a few little wisps of the orange, at the horizon. Mm-hmm. And when we noticed the string of lights, and as it's coming towards us, I'm thinking, oh geez, must be a helicopter way out there. It's coming. Geez, it's coming fast. And then realizing as it gets bigger and bigger, and this huge string of lights, there's no sound. That's not a helicopter. Helicopters don't have a string of lights like that, and then it's getting bigger, and then damn it, it's right up in front of us, huge. You could see the perfect shape of the UFO because it's backlit from the gray of the sky. And this huge string of lights, and it's huge. It's just right in front of us and silently flips over so the bottom's facing towards us. I mean, this is taking everything in front of us, and you're feeling that before it flipped over, I was feeling that strange vibration that you do when you have these experiences. Best way I can describe it, it's sort of like standing at a concert, with the speakers that are, 20 feet high. You're right in front of the speakers, and they got them on full blast, but there's no sound. It's sort of every cell in your body sort of vibrating. Mm-hmm. And, I remember swearing, Jesus Christ, and then that was it. And then standing there, dazed, listening, what's this screaming in the background? It's a stereo instead of music through the patio doors. It's just a radio announcer. Oh, now we're getting hundreds of calls. Now we're getting these calls up the island, far in Vancouver Island. It's zipping up. I don't know these cities, but in Nanaimo or in Parksville, it's zipping up the island. All these calls are coming in. This UFO is zipping down the whole Vancouver Island. And just standing there, dazed, finally realizing what he's saying and listening to this, and I look over, and Greg Jamble and my brother are standing there, and they're dazed, and you just not really, just staring at each other, looking out over the ocean, and it takes minutes and minutes and minutes, and finally I look at my watch, and I realized, in the days that we missed our dinner reservation, I don't know how much time we lost because you're just out of it. We didn't say a word. We looked at each other. We all jumped into jumped into my brother's company car and didn't even go to eat. We went straight to that disco in the bottom of the Empress Hotel, found a bench way in the back in the dark up against the wall, and the three of us sat on the bench with our backs up against the wall like scared little guys, adults, scared out of mind, and just drank. I'm not much of a drinker, never enjoy it, never have, but I drank like a fish that night. I just, not talking, never, got up to ask any, women to dance. What the reason we went there in the first place, to try to get lucky. We're three single guys. And come to at my brother's apartment the next morning. I hear him out in the kitchen, making coffee. I come running out. He's standing there in his robe, having his coffee, reading a paper, and I run up to him. I said, Terry, we've got to talk to somebody about last night. We have to talk to somebody. And he slides the newspaper across it. His face turns red. His eyes pop out, and his finger points at me, and he's screaming at me, you don't tell anybody. We'll lose our jobs. We're banking. This is the days of banking. It's if you wore a light blue shirt, you were a rebel. It's white shirts.
Right.
This is way back, and we never talked about that again for 15 years.
All right, back to the.
But it was in the paper. It was in the paper.
It was.
Oh yeah, he threw the paper across. It was right there in whatever. I think there's a couple Victoria papers. I just the last few months trying to figure out how to search newspaper articles, get something from that, and last week realized that I could go to the all these papers are available at the microfiche at the main library in Victoria, so I'm going to have to go over there and take a few days off.
All right. Quick question for you about when you first saw these lights. Let's drill down here for a minute. You saw a string of lights. What color were these lights?
White.
Were they all on at the same brightness, or were they modulating brightness at all?
No, it looked like, the best way I can describe it, and this is going back, so many years, is that, that those strings of those plastic LED lights that people use for Christmas lights, they're in a plastic tube?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just like that, but a long string of that coming across the ocean. All individual. They were very distinct. You could see each one of those lights. There was quite a few of them, and it just got closer and closer and closer. So when it flipped over on its side, I seem to, remember that they weren't in sequence with, the circle in the middle wasn't in sequence with the extremity, all those lights in that big circle. It's kind of fuzzy, but I seem to remember they weren't moving in the same direction.
Doug, you used the word undercarriage when it flipped over. What do you mean by undercarriage?
Oh, if you take a UFO looking at it straight on, and it just flipped up, so its bottom was facing towards us.
Was the bottom just perfectly flat?
Yeah.
The tail on it?
No, it was gray now. What you had was this huge circle, like a plate holding it straight up. A circle, you can see the gray lights on the outside, huge, and then a circle of lights in the middle. Another circle in the middle. This is the bottom that's facing us.
Got it.
Because it's hooked up. I finally talked to, as I said, I'm finally talking to Derry about this, and he let me know like a month ago when I talked to him before he changed the subject again. He says, "No, I saw that leave." I've never talked to him about this, and he says, "No, I saw that leave. I was standing there, and it came back down on the side and slowly just drifted over to the left and went around the other apartment building." And I go, Jesus, 35 years later, I'm finally talking to my brother and finding out,
Did he assume you knew this already, Doug?
No, he's not comfortable talking about this stuff. And the times that over the decades that I would bring it up, he would say, yeah, but why bring it up? I mean, it just scares me and makes me depressed, so I don't want to talk about it. So this last year, I had some major health problems. This is unfinished business. I wanted to get this out, at least amongst my family. And my mom's, getting old, and she's had congestive heart failure, and she's got all these health issues. I wish I brought it up years ago and talked to my dad, because the stuff I'm getting from my mom of high strangeness, going back to, her grandparents, it's just weird, and somebody should talk about it and maybe record it I just had a son 3 weeks ago, so I can help him if this happens when he grows up. I mean, I had nobody to talk to. That's the worst part.
One more question about what your mother said. I take it the hospital that you were taken to was a military hospital.
No, the Air Force base there didn't have a military hospital.
No, it didn't.
But let's face it, it had a large military base there at that time. So most of the patients would have been military. Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, back in 1957, was just a small town. I asked her about, what was a military base like. She said, at that time it was a huge international training facility for flight training. I mean, there was guys from the Middle East and all over the world that were there taking flight training. These are sort of stuff you don't know as a kid. You grow up on Air Force bases. Who cares? It's not something that ever interested me. But I don't know whether that has anything to do with this, because they may somehow found out. I don't know. That is just something strange. The experience that I had in my life, I mean, these are broad daylight, up close. I can grab upon that as now finally that this is reality. I mean, I can't argue with other people that saw the same damn thing with me anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
I used to, as I mentioned in New York the one time, that anybody that at these Intruders Foundations or people that would talk about, they woke up or they were in bed, they had these dreams. I discounted those type of people right away. I mean, actually, they're having dreams. I mean, I didn't believe any of these type of people, until that one guy at your meeting where I talked. Remember the one meeting where I agreed to talk about this circumstance? And the guy next to me had finished talking, so we were whispering as the other guy was talking, and I looked at him and said, Jesus, you're the first guy I believe with all these dreams. I mean, you're still petrified out of your mind. And he said, yeah, I still sleep with a gun next to my bed. And I says, I never paid any attention to dreams. I mean, and there's only one that I've had as a child a lot is, and I started telling him about that dream of being a little kid and in this huge, I don't know whether it's underground or what it was, but the best way to describe it is like an Astrodome. But it's gray, but it's so big, it's like the sky, but it's uniform, it's artificial, but it's gigantic, and there's UFOs coming in from and leaving from all these directions, and I'm standing there, I'm probably 5 or 6, so excited that maybe one of them's going to come and take me home. He finished the dream for me. Remember I told you that?
Yeah.
I said, that scared the living hell out of me.
Yeah.
You had the same damn dream. Mm-hmm. So it's the first time that I actually considered, I guess maybe it does happen to people when they're in bed.
Yeah, I think it does.
Hi, this is Michelle from Namecheap. We don't have millions of dollars to get race car drivers or models to endorse us, but we will do everything we can to make those who buy domains or web hosting from us as happy as possible. We offer a free SSL as well as free WhoisGuard for a year to protect your identity from spammers or troublemakers. We won't bug you with obnoxious upsells when you check out or in your inbox. But most importantly, our customer service team really cares about you. It's what we pride ourselves in the most because it's your endorsement that means the most to us. If you like what you hear, get deals on both our domains and our web hosting at radio.namecheap.com, radio.namecheap.com, and be sure to play our contest by following us on Twitter.
Thanks, Michelle. And by the way, listeners, please use the coupon code RADIODAY, that's Radio Day, one word, for special discounts at Namecheap.
This is Leslie Kane, and I'm with the Coalition for Freedom of Information, and you are listening to the Paracast with Gene Steinberg and David Biedny.
We have Doug, and we have Bud Hopkins, and we're talking about Doug's lifetime of encounters. Going back to the time you were 5 years old, you woke up and saw aliens?
I woke up, I was so petrified in that house, of these little gray midgets that used to come at night. I used to wrap myself in my covers, actually, and I'll admit it on the air because nobody knows who I am and never will. I used to wrap myself in the covers where only my lips were outside the covers to breathe because I figured I'd wake up if they tried to unwrap me or whatever, these demons or whatever they were that came. And I was laying in bed the one night and the covers were off, and I looked, and there was one of these little gray things. I didn't see his face too well. It was dark, but I sure saw these long, skinny arms and weird long fingers coming in to grab me, extended to come in and get me. It scared the living hell out of me. I remember that, 50 years later. That's the only time I can consciously have that type of dream. And if I guess now put it together with all the other stuff, maybe it was something,
And the further study of your remembrances about these close encounters in terms of seeing the big object, was E.T. amongst them too? Did you see the creatures?
No. They're bookend memories. They're memories at the beginning, seeing these huge crafts, my witness, with the people, remembering it, seeing these huge crafts, and then either coming to and seeing it leave like in a desert, or coming to and not knowing what the hell happened.
Okay, what about the experience where you did undergo hypnotic regression with Bud? Did you recall any creatures there?
No. All I recover is that the sliding, off the road and realizing I was driving and this tremendous pain. That's what put me into this. I was screaming because of the pain. I mean, this wireless taser, this electrical pain shooting through my body. I couldn't even move. I mean, I'm just being electrocuted on Bud's couch. I mean, I could get up for a few minutes and then running around his studio, crying over this, and then wham, I'd slide back into this pain, reliving this electrical. So I don't know where that comes from.
You know, the actual amount of time under hypnosis where he's recalling the experience, the skidding and so on, I would say was a minute, 2 minutes maximum. Wouldn't you say, Doug?
Oh, God, I haven't got a clue, because the amount of pain that sliding back and forth into that was a long time. No, I mean, I was remembering.
But you were fully awake, though. That's the point.
Oh no, yeah.
I mean, you were instantly awake when this happened. I mean, you just sat up and brought yourself out. It's rare that somebody brings themselves out of a hypnotic regression if they're in a very deep, relaxed state. And I have had that happen with a number of other people, but it was always in a case when there was something extremely traumatic that was happening all of a sudden with no warning. So he didn't really have any time to see anything, and I was absolutely averse to ask any questions about what he might have experienced, because anything that would plunge him further back into the experience I wanted to avoid at all costs.
What about dreams, Doug? Do you have any dreams with regard to any of these experiences?
Well, I've had that repeat dream of being a child. I've had some dreams where you wake up, you're petrified. You sort of have like flashbacks and stuff. Faces, these little alien gray faces that have always scared me. I could never read these books. I'd see them at the libraries, and I mean, the reaction. But that's how I knew I had post-traumatic stress. I started reading all these books on psychology, trying to figure out why I was like the way I was. And there was too many weird things that would put me into a terror state. You go to a Christmas party, and you're there and you're fine. You're trying to be social and everything else, and you glance over the one that I remember, and they had one of those. And this is back years ago with those floor lamps. Those long steel arc floor lamps, and with one globe at the end with the light coming out. Yeah. I mean, I might as well have had a heart attack. I mean, I ran out of there shaking, shocking when I saw that in the den, and I have no idea why. Mm-hmm. I mean, but all I saw was that globe with the light underneath, and I realized that something's wrong here. Weird.
Doug, I have to tell you, I've had a couple of other people who've had similar reactions to some kind of light form in a room where they were absolutely terrified.
You don't know why you have these things, so you seek help. And then you have to deal with the stuff that you all remember and over a lifetime that you can't.
Doug, really quick question.
Go ahead.
The light fixture you're describing, are we talking about where you have like the pole and then the metal arm that's kind of like articulated, and then the ball at the end of that?
Yeah, but this particular lamp, instead of a pole, the arcing metal piece is arced that goes across. Across.
So when I say pole, I mean the main straight pole coming up, and then there's an arc piece coming off of that, and then the globe is at the end of the arc piece.
This was just an arc piece coming out of this huge base on the floor.
It's a kind of modern design thing that is essentially the whole thing is an arc. There's no straight piece on it.
Right, and it had a globe, in a weird sort of saucer shape. That's.
But it wasn't the arc piece and the globe that got you freaked. It was just the globe.
It was in this guy's, I think it was his home office.
No, I understand.
His office dark. It was the globe that got me.
It's the globe that got you.
It was a light glow of the glass that was quite darkened, so not much light coming out of that, but more light coming out of the bottom of it.
Okay.
And that's just threw me for a loop. I mean, what the hell is this?
Well, Doug, there's so many of these things like that someone has an irrational fear that they can't understand for something that they see. And I've had, ironically, two different mothers who had very small children, toddlers or babies practically, who seemed to be having experiences and describing the mother describing the same kind of terror that the child had that you've been describing. And these two women independently didn't know each other, described to me the fact that they could not wear dark glasses, sunglasses, with the baby, because the baby would take one look at them as they put on the sunglasses and start to scream and hide their heads.
Wow.
And so there are so many things like this that, for a tiny baby, let's say it's a 3 or 4 or 6 months old baby, to react that way means that there's been already some trauma connected with big black eyes.
Yeah, no, I think this trauma, if it goes back to early childhood, is you just grow up with these symptoms. I mean, you don't know you're different.
One other thing just on this, and I don't mean to take our time on it, but one man that I have worked with is has a black belt in karate. He's a very, very big, powerfully built guy, and he was sleeping at a guest house. Actually, the guest was a friend who had an abduction experience with him. But he was sleeping downstairs and woke up and saw these little gray figures through the sliding glass door that led to the backyard. And here was this very powerfully built black belt karate man, and what he did was pull the covers over his head. He immediately regressed to what he had been like and what he had done to defend himself when he was a tiny child.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's no help out there for people either. That's the part that, is terrible.
I'm wondering here also about the spouses that were involved in the original encounter you mentioned, which took place in the desert. Your brother was with you, his wife, your ex-wife. What about the women? Did they have strange dreams? Do they have any remembrances of things that happened?
Well, I'm positive my brother's wife does, because she is scared out of her wits if you even bring it up. She just won't talk about it. Like she said, she admitted, it's all true to my mom in a quiet kitchen when they're making Thanksgiving dinner, but don't ever bring it up again. And I tried to talk to her, and she says, I don't want to talk about that. I just don't. I will not talk about that, and she'll leave. I mean, she's remembering something that scares the piss out of her.
Yeah, well, she's not denying anything, I take it.
Oh, no. She admits it. She admitted to my mom. She admits it. She's admitted over the years. Yeah, it's true, but I don't want to talk about it. Mm-hmm. You can see the fear in her eyes. I mean, she avoids it. Like my mom says, it was just, she's never seen her like that. She just looked at her and says, yes, it's all true, but don't ever bring that up again. She's scared. And I don't want to scare her anymore. I don't need any more confirmation of this myself. It's taken me a long, hard time to, accept all this myself. It's just too surreal.
Now, the other question that arises here, and I don't want to get too personal about this, so you can tell me where the boundaries are. With regard to your ex-wife, did this encounter impact your marriage seriously?
Yeah, I've wondered about that since. It wasn't very long after that she came to me and says, we wanted to separate, still love me, and blah, 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 and just needed to get away. And I begged and cried and tried to figure out what is it, what can, we can go for help, whatever. She never had an explanation. And I wonder whether she was just scared. But that hurt so bad, I just cut her out of my life. I mean,
Okay, did she know that you had a lifetime of strange things happening to you?
No, I never talked to other people about this stuff.
This is Timothy Green Beckley, otherwise known as Mr. UFO, reporting live for the Conspiracy Journal. And we have a special offer to the listeners of the Paracast. Want to receive our publications for free? Conspiracy Journal and Bizarre Bazaar sent to you via snail mail. And all you have to do is email me at MrUFO@webtv.net. That's MrUFO@webtv.net, and we'll send you two of the most exciting publications. But we do need your actual address because these are physical publications, and you'll enjoy all the latest articles by some of the leading researchers in the field, as well as up-to-date information on the latest book and videos, and it's all for free. Or drop us a line, Mr. UFO at webtv.net.
This is the Paracast with your hosts, Gene Steinberg and David Biedny. You never know what's going to happen next.
We have Doug, we have Bud Hopkins. We're discussing Doug's lifetime of UFO-related encounters, abduction experiences, whatever they are. Okay, what about children? Did you have children?
Yeah, my second wife, I had a child, as Bud was mentioning. I just didn't want to face anything on that. I don't know whether we ever talked about that, Bud, when I was out there. But, I'd have talks to her, not about what was going on. I didn't want to scare her. She's a massively intelligent little girl at the time. I divorced, and she was spending 3.5 days every week with me and 3.5 days with her mom. But she started at about 5 or 6 that she was always scared at my place. I mean, terrified, and she didn't know why. And I'd talk about it and say, well, geez, our bedrooms are up on the second floor, and it's so safe, and just like your mom's house, and she's way out in the country, and we got way more lights here in the city, and blah, blah, blah. She could never explain it. And I was sensitive to that because, I definitely didn't want that to be happening to my daughter.
Now, the other question, of course, is sometimes we hear stories of families having histories of this. What about your mom? What about your dad? Anything happened to them that was unusual?
Well, Mom tells me stories of stuff that goes back for generations, but high strange stuff that, these are very religious people that left the Hutterite colonies in South Dakota in the turn of the century to get land in Saskatchewan. They're almost all of them were ministers. And, they'd see ghosts. They'd have, Mom says, strange things where, the men are arguing over a piece of land, and a teacup right in the kitchen would, rise off the kitchen table, rise slowly to the ceiling, slide across the ceiling, and crash into the wall. And that was the last argument they ever had about that piece of land. This is a minister.
So then if I have an argument with anyone over any issue, if I can just raise a cup, I'm in good shape.
You'd scare these folks. I don't know whether you know what Hutterites are, but, they go back 500 years. They're, I guess, very close to being, sort of like the Amish. They live in their colonies. They all dress the same, so there's no envy. They're very self-sufficient for 500 and some years. So all these high strangeness stuff that happened. Her great grandmother, and I'm just starting to record these things for just, I guess, my children, not for anybody else's stuff, but where her mom and dad were getting ready to get married. They were staying at their parents. This is, when did she say this is? Mom's got just a great memory. 1922, just before the wedding. And her great-grandmother, they couldn't wake up in the morning in a farmhouse. This is 1922 in Saskatchewan. This is way back, and they couldn't wake her up, and they shook her and everything else. She was just almost like dead, but she's still breathing. So they went, well, just leave her alone, and I guess she must be tired, and she'll wake up. And you don't rush in to the city in those days to the doctor anyway. And she woke up in the middle of the afternoon, came down into the kitchen, and says, "Oh, I feel just great. I went home back to South Dakota. I was so homesick." She was used to stay with her son and daughter-in-law. She was so homesick. She had just moved up, married her great-grandfather. And she says, it was great, Jerry. I cleaned the house, and I moved all the furniture around, and blah, blah, blah. And nobody thought anything about it. 3 weeks later, they get a letter in the mail from her son and daughter-in-law saying that, geez, strange thing happened, and it's the same night. Somebody broke into the house and moved all the furniture around. Now, that's just weird, Yep. But as Mom says, when my mom, and she say it in Hutterish, which is High German, that is true, I was there. That was true, I was there. They don't talk about this thing because it's either evil or, it's strange. You whisper about it, you know what I mean? So, yeah, and Mom talks about seeing over the farmyard when they're milking cows. Perfectly blue sky in July, not a cloud in the sky. and then hearing a crack sound like thunder, but there's no clouds in the skies, and they all run out, and there's a little tiny cloud in the sky above the farmyard that looks like a hat, a gray hat. She says, it looked just like one of those hats, with the big brims. And then, everybody wondered what that big crash was. And there at the far end of the farmyard, where on the other side of the granaries, there was a big rock that stood there. For years, they tried to get rid of it, but could never afford dynamite, couldn't break it. It was so hard. Shattered into little pieces. And I said, well, what any other strange things? I mean, you were dairy farmers. Did you ever lose any cattle or any of that stuff? Oh, no. But there was the field on the northwest corner that because that was her job to herd the cattle around into different fields, the cows to graze. And she says, that field, the cows would never graze in. And I said, why? She says, well, there's this perfect 50-foot circle that was in the field that we called, and I don't know how to reach for it, but the translation is teapot. It's like you took a teapot, one of those big teapots, and shoved it into the dirt, because from the sides, it's perfectly round, had a 45-degree angle down to the bottom, all the way around. I said, the cattle wouldn't feed there. Oh, no, nobody went out there. I mean, even my 4 brothers, they never played out there. I don't know why. That's weird, she says.
It certainly is.
I'm like, oh, God,
Man.
Well, one thing I'd like to do, Doug, in some of the remaining time, if it's okay with everybody, is I'd like to ask a few questions about what you make of all this. There are people who talk about the phenomenon as being some very good, helpful thing that's here to help, and other people who see it as satanic and so forth. And, of course, I have my own view of it. I'd be curious to get your feelings about this, and also what kind of recommendations you might have for people who might be paying attention to us now who might have been having these experiences. And I'm sure you have a list of things to avoid doing and things that might be helpful. Is that something we could do?
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing is that, you search into this a little bit over the decades, you don't have anybody to talk to. The biggest thing is to try to find somebody to talk to. I mean, this last 6 or 7 months, and it's kind of scary to call people when, I've found a couple that I believe are true abductees that I can video conference with. And although it's very hard to do, and 5-6 times you see them online, you don't click. But because a couple hours of talking and finding out they had the same experiences, you feel good somehow. It's like a pent up, anger and fear. When you share it with somebody, it's and they feel the same way, and they've had so many similar stuff that's just strange. You feel better, but you got to stay away from the internet. A lot of it, because there's so many wackos out there. I mean, crystal healing and embrace Jesus and it'll all end and you'll be fine and all this sort of crap. If you can find people, I guess, on the Paracast or somewhere that you can talk to, it helps. You got to swallow the fear and just take that step, and as soon as you can. I mean, and you can hang up and go back 6 months later, when you feel more comfortable. Don't, and I still refuse to read books on this subject. It drives me crazy when I hear the conspiracy stuff on even the podcast, because we don't know. We don't have a clue. But it's traumatized you. There's no doubt about it. It's don't need to be so highly strung and anxious subconsciously your whole life. This is not a good thing. I don't really believe, these stuff I hear or see online that, they're here to save us and all. I mean, no, this is traumatizing us. Are they doing it on purpose? I don't know.
Maybe we're just the anthill. They don't care what we do, how we react. They just do their thing.
Yeah, but, some of it can cause problems. I mentioned that one I ran in to see a bud where they collected the sperm. I mean, I went through 2 years of medical problems because of that. So,
well, they collected the sperm. When did that happen?
I ran in to see you, but I mean, that was hard for me to run into Ashley. See, I caught you at the book signing with your wife. Mm-hmm. And I waited and waited and waited and waited till the crowds left. I drove into the city. Mm-hmm. And when you finally were free and you took a few minutes to talk to me, and you were quite surprised that's never happened to me before, but I woke up, in terrible pain in Stamford, Connecticut in the middle of the night, frozen, couldn't move. I moved my eyes to the left, and there was a hybrid. Mm-hmm. Kneeling there, and as I mentioned to you, and I'm screaming, in my head. It wasn't with my mouth. I couldn't move, straining my eyes to look at her. Who the hell are you? Yeah. And she says she's Fran, my ex-wife. Well, Jesus, I hated that woman, and I knew it wasn't Fran. I mean, it's the ugliest thing you've ever seen. I mean, if you took somebody out of the concentration camp, a woman out of the concentration camp at the end of the war, and gave her chemotherapy for about 6 months, that's what you look like.
We won't get into ex-wives here.
But I'm screaming there like that, and the pain in between my legs, I strained my eyes and looked down, and there was a Gray's head. And he's got something in between my legs with something shoved up my what. And that's that electrical pulsing sensation. I didn't know what the hell they were doing, but oh my God, it was painful. All I could do was try to clench my cheeks together, and I was just screaming in pain, and then bam, after about 30 seconds of that, I came to, and I have never slept walk. I've never woke up outside my bed in my life. I woke up and downstairs running into the wall, screaming. To this day, I don't know how the neighbors didn't call the police, screaming out loud as you can, running into the wall, trying to escape something. The pain and the blood, wiping my rear end, the blood for 2 days. Well, I was in pain, as I told you, when I finally found you 2 days later. Right. And I never went to the doctor, and it got worse and worse and worse. It was 2.5 years before I finally went to the doctor here when I moved back to Canada. Because I just couldn't stand it anymore. If you had to start, that first feeling of urination, well, if I didn't get to the bathroom within 5 minutes, I couldn't stand the pain anymore. I'd pee my pants. And
well, now, wait a minute, Doug. So let me I want to just understand something here. This thing, there was something inserted in your anus or your urethra. Was in your anus, right?
My anus.
Okay, not your urethra, because then you're describing, this pain of like having to go to the bathroom, not urination, the other thing.
No, medically, I know I had an orgasm before I passed out, but this infected me. I ended up finally seeing a doctor here. I couldn't stand the pain anymore, and my family insisted, and I got referred to a specialist, and he did, finally checked into the hospital and put that long tube up my, you go to the bathroom before that, but I still feel the pain afterwards. The guy just looked at me in astonishment and says, "Are you insane? How could you stand this pain for so long?" I mean, I feel the pain. He said, my prostate, my bladder, and my kidney was so badly infected that the first course of antibiotics didn't work, and I ended up on 1,000 milligrams of Cipro for 2 months.
Ooh, Jesus.
I mean, this is...
And people need to understand, Cipro, one of the most powerful antibiotics, when the whole anthrax scare thing happened back here in the States after 9/11, what they were giving people who they thought were exposed to it was Cipro. And I've taken Cipro for diverticulitis, and Cipro is some powerful stuff. It's one of the most powerful antibiotics that's out there. It lays you out. So for you to say you were on Cipro for 2.5 months, did you say?
2 months.
2 months. That's
2 months. The first
very serious.
Nothing.
Oh, man.
I mean, it was eating my stomach apart after that length of time.
Oh, God.
But hey, man, it cured it up, and I mean, now, after that, it was all cure. I mean, it was back to normal. I mean, you got to go pee. That's fine. You'll get to.
Well, now hold on, Doug. So the doctors, I mean, they, you go in. This is like a couple of years after this episode. So you've got a couple of years of pain going on.
Oh yeah, it got worse and worse right from the beginning.
All right, but no. Before you answer, when the doctors examined you, what did they tell you? What did they think had happened?
Oh, I would never have told them anything. I mean,
no, not that you told them. What did they diagnose this as besides just an infection? I mean,
it's a terrible infection. Like I say, my prostate, bladder, and kidney were all infected. I mean, I could never get out all the urine. So, like I said, when he put that metal tube, it was sprouting all over the place. I'm screaming in pain. Unbelievable. The nurses are holding me down, and it's spurting all over the operating room. And this doctor looked at me and says, how long have you got? Are you nuts? I mean, how could you stood the pain? Well, I'm not going to a doctor and saying, this happened to me. And, he'd look at me and say, well, you got to stop putting a cattle prod up your ass.
Well, Doug, the point is, and it's a message for anybody listening to the program, is that you should go to a doctor immediately when something like this happens.
Anything happens that's painful, you have to go to the doctor.
Yeah, and you're not required to say anything about a UFO experience. You just go in and say, I don't know what happened to me, but I'm in terrible pain, and everybody should do that right away. People have often refused to go to a doctor because they somehow think that they're going to have to go in and explain about a UFO encounter, and that's not necessary at all. But they need to get help right away.
Well, you don't have to tell the doctor that I know how this happened, do we? For 58 years, Fate has provided true reports of the strange and unknown. Fate brings you the latest in all aspects of the paranormal, like angels and miracles, psychic phenomena, ghosts, UFOs, and much, much more. To receive your complimentary Fate magazine, call now at 1-800-728-2730 or visit their website at www.fatemag.com. That's 1-800-728-2730 or www.fatemag.com. What are you waiting for? Your fate awaits.
You've entered another dimension. You've entered the Paracast.
By the way, we have Doug for another segment with Bud Hopkins, and we're exploring, my God, some frightening encounters. And by the way, while we were doing this, I was instant messaging my son in Spain, and I just gave him a couple of hints as to what was going on. I'm getting yikes or oh my God, etc., etc. David, you had something you were going to add.
So, Doug, let's step out of this for a moment. We've got, let's just tally this up. We've got a strange situation with you in a hospital for 5 weeks as a kid. We've got episodes of you waking up at night, finding these things in the room. We've got these 2 encounters with multiple people, with craft missing time. And then you're describing this most recent thing you're describing, it happens to you as an adult. All right.
Yeah, that's Stanford, 2005. Was that when your book signing was, Bud?
Yes, it was.
It was about 6 months after I saw that daylight gigantic UFO in Old Greenwich.
Yeah, right. The one that you took in the daytime.
Huge one, just silently going over the Binney Park.
Yeah. Now we haven't talked about that.
I've got so many of these.
But that's why I just want to get I know that you might have talked to Bud about this stuff offline, but remember we're here talking about it on the air. So Greenwich, Connecticut, you have another. So let's put this in the timeline. When?
Okay, that'd be 2005, probably about May of 2005, I got up in the morning, got my suit on after breakfast. I was going into a client's appointment to their home in Old Greenwich. At that time, I was still living in Old Greenwich. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going over to their house. It's probably 9:30 in the morning. I work for myself, so so no rush. And I'm coming around where the library is. There's a little traffic circle, and I feel this body sensation, this light electrical, where your cells start exciting, and this hum feeling. And I go, what the hell? And I look up out the window of the car, just entering the traffic circle, and all the cars come to a stop. I come to a stop, and I watch in just, what the hell, in broad daylight, over the Binney Park, which is, some trees on the outskirts, up a hill off to the right, but right over the park was a UFO, just silently, just slowly going across the park, heading towards, that would be east. And I watched it for, 30 seconds as it slowly went down, and you could feel that hum. What I thought at the time is that these buggers are scanning. It felt like a hum. The earth, everything's kind of humming, as they're going over the park. They're scanning for something or whatever, or that affects where it's short circuits or central nervous system. That's why our minds, memories are fragmented. And I'm sitting there watching it slowly, going, I got to remember this. I got to remember this as I move my head, watching it go across. I got to remember this. I got to remember this. And it disappeared over that little hill. You come out, you look at it, look at all the cars. People started moving, and I floored it, and I went to these people's house. They were friends of mine, and I'd mentioned, the one in the desert with these people at a dinner party years before. I didn't tell them much, and I said, Jesus Christ, I just saw a UFO over the Binney Park, and they all, smiled and, didn't say much because, most people just don't believe it. And you don't talk to people about this because you like to keep that respect and facade about yourself that they don't know. And it was just a few months later that I guess they found me that, I had that sperm collection thing that I ran in to see Bud.
Now, isn't that right near Route 95 where the library is?
Yeah. Oh, which? The Binney Park? Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's the big Greenwich Library.
No, the old Greenwich Library.
Oh, the old one now. Because I thought if it was Route 95, that's a lot of stop traffic.
No, it's not on 95. 95 is not very far from there, though.
Yeah, right.
To the east. This is right into Binney Park where it went over. It was headed that direction.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if what you're describing, Doug. You have to wonder if anybody potentially called this thing in to Peter Davenport's New Fork or to anybody else. I mean, if you're seeing this in broad daylight and you're saying cars are stopping, right? I mean, stop. So presumably other people are obviously seeing this as well.
And we would have a good approximation of time because that's probably no more than 3 or 4 months before I ran in to see you in the city, Bud.
Mm-hmm. So just once more, give us on that. So just give us a month and a year, then once more, so we have it now.
I'm not good for months, but it was probably 4 months before the sperm collection, and I saw Bud a day and a half after the sperm collection at your book signing with your ex-wife. Mm-hmm. It was at that. Was that an observatory?
2005.
Yeah.
So 2005, probably spring of 2005, late winter, early spring, maybe.
Early spring, probably. I think.
Early spring. The only reason I'm asking this again is to do a little bit of groundwork. Either I'll try to do this, or maybe one of our listeners, when this episode airs, to go look at the New Fork database to see if there were any other reports, just to do some triangulation of data. Did anybody else end up reporting this in any way? Because when you have that many people see it, though, this is really tough because
hundreds of people called in on the Victoria one. I mean, right. I'm curious on that one. People have kept quiet that didn't call into the radio station. I started another Yahoo email account called Victoria, which is the city UFO, one word, at yahoo.com. that they could send in their reports to me. If they remember that one in Victoria, I will at some point go over and get that newspaper clipping, I guess.
Okay, why don't you mention that again? Is this still an active address?
I just opened it.
Okay.
Victoria, that's the name of the city, UFO at yahoo.com.
Victoria UFO at yahoo.com. I guess everybody here has ex-wives. It's a very interesting show. My first wife lives in Victoria and worked with me on a UFO-oriented magazine, and I will have to inquire of her if she knows anything about it.
Mm-hmm. It was on the radio, it was in the paper, so there's got to be something, that we can find, I can find, although I know, David, you're trying to find information on that one in
Venezuela. Well, that's a tough one. I mean, ultimately for that one, it really comes down to me having to have the wherewithal to go down to Caracas, to go do the groundwork, go visit the newspaper offices, grease some palms. I mean, that's one where it's going to have to, for me to get that, I've been in touch with friends down there, and basically all tell me the same thing. Essentially, if you want to do this, you're going to have to take the time and go do the legwork and grease the palms and make it happen. It's the only way, really. In that part of the world, in many other parts of the world, that's true too, but especially that part of the world, that's just the way things work.
Yeah, but like I said, I could go do that, but then it's like you, David. Why do we need to? We know it happened. I mean,
we were there.
There's no denying it. We saw it. There's no denying it. We heard it on the radio. We got witnesses. I mean, I don't care what other people think. I mean, I finally had to accept this, and Bud convinced me to go on this show, and I guess a little bit of you. I think just so other people that are fighting with this issue can get a little help.
I wanted to ask you something, Doug, and we only have maybe 7 or 8 minutes left. Mm-hmm. And that is, all right, obviously this hypnotic regression attempt ended up being a non-starter, but where do you progress from here? Do you want to try to explore those hidden memories or let them stay hidden?
No way. Why would I want to try to learn what else they did to me? Why would I want to traumatize myself any more than I have been? I mean, that's just sadistic.
Well, also, Doug, you realize that the most important fact of all, which is whatever it was, you survived it. Yeah. Here you are, and we're sitting around and talking, and you're a new father, and you've got all kinds of good things going, and that's the central thing right now. And I would certainly advise you to follow your instinct and avoid what are you going to find out except more details, but you're going to re-experience trauma, and there's no reason why you should do that to yourself now.
No way. There's nothing to learn. I mean, it's taken me 55 years to finally accept the undeniable and start to deal with it. I mean, talking to you again, I felt sorry when I heard you on that radio show, and I also heard you on that podcast on this show with David Jacobs, who I'd met and never talked to either. I heard the sadness in your voice that the one thing you regret is just there's nothing you can do to help these people.
I know.
So this show, if all I could do, as you said, is help people to finally face up to it and realize they're not alone. They're okay, they're safe, but there's things that you can do, talk to other people and start dealing with it.
When I was looking over my notes of the session that we did, I remember noting down that I said many more times than once when you were in such a terrible emotional state, that the main thing to remember is that you're a survivor, that you survived all of this. You came through this. And that it says something about your own personal inner strength, that you came through it okay. That's the bottom line. That's the basic thing to remember.
Absolutely.
And it may also be about having heard of other cases, Doug, that maybe you do know what happened to you, more or less, even if the fine details remain hidden. But wanted to ask you before we, as they say, split for the evening, let you go and end the session. Can you give some quick advice to people out there who are in Doug's position? They've had really frightening encounters. What can they do next? How can they get a hold of you if they wish to share the information or maybe have you study it further?
Well, I'm pretty heavily inundated as it is, but it's perhaps possible that we can refer someone to a person